In the heart of Brookhaven, a busy city filled with skyscrapers and endless traffic, two young creators were trying to make their mark on the internet. These two weren't your typical office workers or students. They were chasing something bigger, fame on social media. They had dreams of becoming influencers, people who could inspire others with their ideas and content. But despite all their hard work, their YouTube channel was barely getting noticed. No matter what they tried, whether it was sharing tips about how to organize your life or posting travel videos, it just didn't seem to click with viewers. Late one evening, as they sat at a small cafe sipping coffee, they started talking about why their channel wasn't working. Was it because their content wasn't exciting enough? Or maybe they weren't tapping into the right topics? One of them pulled out their phone and began scrolling through trending videos online. That's when they stumbled upon something that caught their attention, a clip showing raw, unfiltered moments of real life. It wasn't polished or perfect. Instead, it felt gritty and honest. And most importantly, it had millions of views. The idea hit them like a lightning bolt. What if we show the world something no one else is showing? One of them said. The other hesitated for a moment, but then nodded slowly. They decided to focus on something many people avoid looking at: the lives of those living on the streets. Their plan wasn't malicious at first. They thought filming people rummaging through trash bins or struggling to find food might open people's eyes to the harsh realities of homelessness. Maybe, they reasoned, it would even spark conversations about how society can do better. With cameras packed and nerves tingling, they stepped out into the less glamorous parts of the city. This wasn't the side of Brookhaven tourists visited. It was where broken dreams seemed to gather, tucked away in shadowy alleyways and forgotten corners. As they walked deeper into these areas, they saw faces etched with hardship. There were men sitting on cardboard boxes, women bundled up in layers of clothes to keep warm, and even children holding onto their parents tightly. Each person carried their own story, though none of them looked eager to share it. Their first encounter happened almost by chance. A man in his late 40s was digging through a dumpster behind a restaurant. His clothes were torn, and his hands were dirty, but he moved with purpose, searching for anything edible. When the duo approached him, he looked up, startled. At first he refused to be filmed, shaking his head firmly. But after some coaxing, and promises that this would bring attention to the issues faced by people like him, he finally agreed. He introduced himself simply as Carl. With the camera rolling, Carl explained how he ended up on the streets after losing his job during the pandemic. His words were heavy with emotion, and you could hear the pain in his voice as he talked about missing his family. Not far from there, they met another individual, a woman who appeared younger than Carl. She sat on the curb, clutching a loaf of bread she'd scavenged from a nearby grocery store's trash bin. Her name was Lisa, and unlike Carl, she didn't hesitate to speak. In fact, she poured her heart out, telling them how she once had a stable life with a job and an apartment until everything fell apart. Now, she lived day by day, unsure of where her next meal would come from. Her vulnerability struck a chord with the filmmakers, and they couldn't help but feel a mix of guilt and fascination as they recorded her story. As they continued filming, they found themselves drawn into a world they'd never truly understood before. It wasn't just about capturing shocking images for views anymore. For the first time, they were face to face with the human side of homelessness. Yet even as they listened to these stories, they couldn't shake off the nagging feeling that what they were doing might not be entirely right. Sure, they believed, they were shining a light on important issues, but deep down, they wondered if they were crossing a line. After all, these weren't actors playing roles. They were real people with real struggles. Despite their doubts, the footage they captured was powerful. Back in their small apartment, they pieced together the clips, adding dramatic music and captions designed to grab attention. Phrases like, "This is America," and "You won't believe what we found," flashed across the screen. The final product was raw, emotional, and undeniably gripping. When they uploaded the video, they braced themselves for reactions, but nothing could have prepared them for what came next. Within hours, the video blew up. Thousands of people watched it, leaving comments ranging from praise to anger. Some viewers thanked them for exposing the truth, while others accused them of exploiting vulnerable individuals for likes and shares. Brands started reaching out, offering deals to collaborate, and local news stations wanted interviews. Overnight, they went from being unknown creators to internet sensations. But as the numbers climbed, so did the whispers of criticism. Little did they know, this was only the beginning of a much larger story, one that would test their morals, challenge their intentions, and force them to confront the consequences of their actions. The video had gone viral, and the creators couldn't believe their eyes. Thousands of views turned into tens of thousands within hours, and soon they were crossing the 100,000 mark. Notifications buzzed nonstop on their phones. Likes, shares, comments, and even messages from strangers flooded in. Some people praised them for shedding light on an issue that many preferred to ignore. Others, however, weren't so kind. The comment section quickly became a battleground of opinions. Finally, someone is showing the truth. One viewer wrote, "This is disgusting. Why are you filming people eating trash?" Another shot back. Despite the mixed reactions, the numbers kept climbing. Advertisers who had previously ignored their emails were now reaching out with offers to sponsor future videos. Local news stations invited them for interviews, eager to feature their groundbreaking project. It felt surreal. For months they had struggled to get noticed, but now it seemed like everyone wanted a piece of them. Fame, which had once felt so distant, was suddenly within reach. But as the days passed, something started to shift. While the initial wave of excitement brought them joy, they began noticing how their newfound success affected the very people they had filmed. Carl, the man they met digging through the dumpster, became an unwilling internet sensation. Strangers recognized him on the streets, pointing and whispering. Some mocked him, imitating the way he rummaged through trash. Others stared at him, with pity, making him feel like a spectacle rather than a human being. Lisa, the woman clutching the loaf of bread, faced her own struggles. She told them later that she felt humiliated every time someone mentioned the video. Her story, shared in a moment of vulnerability, had been reduced to entertainment for millions of viewers. The weight of what they had done started to sink in, though neither of them wanted to admit it aloud. They tried to justify their actions by telling themselves they were raising awareness. But deep down, they knew there was more to it. They craved validation, attention, and success. And now, they were getting all of it. As the weeks went by, they returned to the streets to film more content. This time, they didn't approach it with the same hesitance as before. Now, they moved with confidence, convinced they were doing good work. They sought out new locations, finding different corners of the city where homeless individuals gathered. One evening, they came across a group huddled near a dimly lit alleyway. A man sitting against the wall caught their eye. His clothes were worn, and his face bore the marks of years spent battling life's hardships. When they asked if they could film him, he nodded reluctantly, too tired to argue. What happened next changed everything. As they set up their camera, they realized this man wasn't naturally interacting with his surroundings. Instead, they found themselves directing him, telling him to dig deeper into the trash or pretend to search for food even when he said he wasn't hungry. At one point, they encouraged two individuals to argue over scraps, claiming it would add drama to the scene. Neither person looked comfortable, but they went along with it, perhaps hoping for a few coins or a bottle of water. In return, later that night as they reviewed the footage, doubt crept in. Watching the clips, they saw moments that made them uneasy. The forced expressions, the awkward pauses, the clear discomfort on the faces of the people they had filmed. It was no longer raw reality. It was staged, manipulated for maximum impact. Yet instead of addressing these feelings, they pushed them aside. After all, the last video had worked wonders for their channel. If anything, this new footage promised to be even better. Their second video followed the same formula as the first: dramatic music, bold captions, and a narrative designed to shock. But this time, the backlash was louder. Viewers who had initially supported them began questioning their methods. "Why are you exploiting these people?" one comment read. "This isn't raising awareness, it's turning pain into profit," another added. Even some of their closest friends expressed concern, urging them to rethink their approach. Then came the confrontation. One afternoon, while filming yet another segment, Carl appeared out of nowhere. His face was red with anger, and his voice trembled as he shouted, "You think this is just a show? This is my life!" The words hit them like a punch to the gut. For the first time, they saw the full weight of what they had done. They weren't just documenting reality. They were reshaping it, twisting it into something it wasn't, all for the sake of views. Despite the growing criticism, they refused to stop. They convinced themselves that the positive messages outweighed the negative ones. People were talking about homelessness, weren't they? That had to count for something. So, they pressed on, ignoring the unease gnawing at the edges of their conscience. Little did they know, their decision to keep going would lead to consequences far greater than they could have imagined. Behind the scenes, tensions between the two creators began to rise. One of them started questioning whether they were truly helping or simply using people for personal gain. The other insisted they were making a difference, arguing that any exposure was better than none. Their arguments grew heated, reflecting the chaos brewing around them. Meanwhile, the online storm showed no signs of calming. Activist groups began taking notice, dissecting their videos frame by frame to expose the unethical practices hidden beneath the surface. As the pressure mounted, they found themselves trapped in a cycle of guilt and denial. Every click, every view, every comment reminded them of the cost of their ambition. Yet pulling back felt impossible. The machine they had built demanded constant fuel, and stopping meant facing the truth about who they had become. The line between raising awareness and exploitation blurred further with each passing day, leaving them unsure of where to draw the boundary, or if they ever had. Unbeknownst to them, the worst was yet to come. The world was watching, and it wouldn't forget what they had done. The backlash that followed their second video was like a tidal wave crashing over them. What had started as scattered criticism turned into a full-blown storm of outrage. One morning they woke up to find their channel trending, not for the reasons they had hoped. A popular activist group called Humans First had released a scathing expose on their practices. The group meticulously analyzed every frame of their videos, pointing out moments where they manipulated situations for dramatic effect. Screenshots showed how they encouraged people to dig deeper into dumpsters or stage arguments over scraps of food. The expose spread like wildfire across social media platforms. People shared it everywhere, and soon hashtags like #StopExploitation and Real Awareness began trending alongside their names. Viewers who had once supported their work now joined the chorus of condemnation. "How could you do this?" one commenter wrote. "These aren't props. These are human beings." Another added, "You're not raising awareness. You're profiting off someone else's pain." For the first time since they started this project, the creators felt truly cornered. Brands that had eagerly reached out with sponsorship deals suddenly pulled back. Emails flooded in from companies explaining that associating with their channel no longer aligned with their values. Even worse, YouTube demonetized their account, cutting off the revenue stream they had relied on. Their dreams of financial stability through content creation were crumbling before their eyes. But the fallout didn't stop there. Friends and acquaintances who had cheered them on during their rise to fame began distancing themselves. Some unfollowed them on social media, while others sent private messages expressing disappointment. Family members too weighed in. During a tense phone call, one of their parents asked, "Is this really who you want to be? Someone who uses other people's suffering to get ahead?" As the criticism mounted, they tried to defend themselves. In interviews and comments, they argued that their intentions were good. "We're shining a light on an important issue," they said repeatedly. But the words felt hollow, even as they spoke them. Deep down, they knew the truth. They had crossed a line. Somewhere along the way, their desire for fame had overshadowed their original goal of creating meaningful content. Now they were paying the price. One day, while scrolling through the endless stream of angry comments, they stumbled upon a message that stopped them cold. It was from Lisa, the woman they had filmed eating discarded bread. Her words were simple, but carried the weight of raw emotion. "I trusted you," she wrote, "and you made me look like a joke to millions of people." Reading those words felt like a punch to the gut. For days afterward, they couldn't shake the image of her face, tired, vulnerable, betrayed. That message became a turning point. They realized they couldn't keep ignoring the consequences of their actions. Sitting together in their tiny apartment, surrounded by cameras and tripods, they finally allowed themselves to confront the reality of what they had done. The silence between them was heavy, broken only by the occasional sigh. Neither of them wanted to speak first, but both knew they couldn't go on like this. Eventually, one of them broke the silence. "What if we apologize?" they suggested hesitantly. The idea seemed almost too simple, yet it lingered in the air like a lifeline. If nothing else, an apology might show the world, and themselves, that they understood the harm they had caused. More importantly, it might give them a chance to make things right. They spent hours drafting the apology, rewriting sentences until they felt genuine. When they finally posted the video, it was unlike anything they had ever created before. There were no dramatic captions, no background music, just two people sitting in front of the camera speaking directly to their audience. They admitted to exploiting vulnerable individuals and acknowledged the pain they had caused. They promised to donate all earnings from the controversial videos to local homeless shelters and pledged to volunteer their time helping those in need. The response was mixed. Some viewers appreciated their honesty and willingness to take responsibility. Others remained skeptical, accusing them of performing yet another act for publicity. One commenter summed it up perfectly. "Actions speak louder than words. Show us you mean it." Determined to prove their sincerity, they rolled up their sleeves and got to work. Over the next few weeks, they visited shelters across the city, serving meals and listening to stories from the very people they had once exploited. At first, it was awkward. Many of the individuals they met recognized them immediately, and some weren't shy about expressing their anger. "Why should we trust you now?" one man asked pointedly. They didn't have a perfect answer, but they kept showing up, day after day, hoping their actions would eventually earn back a sliver of trust. Slowly, they began to see glimpses of change, not just in the community but within themselves. Working at the shelters forced them to confront the harsh realities of homelessness in ways their videos never had. They learned about systemic issues like lack of affordable housing, inadequate health care, and job discrimination. They heard stories of resilience and hope, of people fighting tirelessly to rebuild their lives despite overwhelming odds. One afternoon, while handing out sandwiches at a shelter, they ran into Carl, the man who had confronted them weeks earlier. His expression was unreadable as he approached them. For a moment, they braced themselves for another outburst. Instead, he simply said, "If you really want to help, stop making us your spectacle." Then he walked away, leaving them standing, there, stunned. His words echoed in their minds long after he was gone. Spectacle. That's exactly what they had turned these people's lives into, a performance designed to shock and entertain. It wasn't enough to serve meals or hand out water bottles. Real change required more than surface-level efforts. It demanded understanding, empathy, and a commitment to addressing root causes rather than symptoms. By the end of their volunteering stint, they felt a shift inside themselves. The hunger for fame that had driven them for so long had faded, replaced by a newfound sense of purpose. They still believed in the power of storytelling, but they understood now that true impact came, not from exploiting pain, but from amplifying hope. Their journey wasn't over. It was just beginning. And though they couldn't undo the damage they had done, they vowed to spend the rest of their lives making amends in whatever way they could. Little did they know, this decision would lead them down a path far more rewarding than any number of views or likes ever could. After the whirlwind of backlash, apologies, and volunteering at shelters, the two creators found themselves standing at a crossroads. Their old life, the one filled with chasing views, crafting dramatic videos, and dreaming of internet fame, felt like a distant memory. But the new path ahead wasn't clear either. They had promised to do better, to help without exploiting, but figuring out how to actually make that happen was harder than they imagined. One evening, as they sat in their cramped apartment surrounded by notes from their time at the shelters, one of them said something that struck a chord. "We messed up big time, but maybe we can use what we learned to actually make a difference this time." The other nodded slowly, though skepticism lingered in their eyes. It sounded good in theory, but could they really turn things around? Could they rebuild trust, not just with their audience, but with the very people they had hurt? The idea came to them almost accidentally. While volunteering, they noticed how many incredible stories went untold. There were men and women who had been through unimaginable hardships yet still managed to find hope, even if it was just a tiny spark. These weren't tales of despair or shock value. They were stories of resilience, grit, and humanity. What if instead of focusing on the pain, they highlighted the strength and dignity of these individuals? What if they created content that celebrated solutions rather than wallowing in problems? They decided to try something completely different. AI documentary series made in collaboration with homeless advocates and nonprofit organizations. This time they wouldn't just show up with cameras and start filming. Instead, they would work closely with the community, listening to their needs, and ensuring everyone involved felt respected and heard. The goal wasn't to grab attention for themselves anymore. It was to amplify voices that had long been ignored. But getting started wasn't easy. For one thing, they needed permission, not just from the people they wanted to feature, but also from the organizations working tirelessly to support them. At first, many were hesitant. After everything that had happened, why should anyone trust them? One shelter coordinator summed it up bluntly. "You burned bridges when you exploited people. Now you want to come back and play hero?" Their response was honest and raw. "We don't expect forgiveness," they admitted, "and we're not here to be heroes. We just want to help tell these stories the right way for once." That honesty seemed to open doors. Slowly, some organizations agreed to partner with them, provided they followed strict guidelines. No staged scenes, no manipulation, just real unfiltered moments captured with care and respect. As they began filming, they quickly realized how much harder this approach was compared to their earlier videos. In the past, they had rushed to capture shocking images and edit them into bite-sized clips designed to go viral. Now they spent hours simply talking to people, building relationships before even thinking about turning on the camera. They learned to listen, not just to the words being spoken, but to the emotions behind them. One man they met at a shelter stood out in particular. He had been living on the streets for years after losing his job and family home. Despite everything he had endured, he spoke with a quiet determination about rebuilding his life. When they asked if they could film him, he hesitated. "Why should I let you?" he asked. "Last time, people like me ended up looking like jokes." They didn't have an easy answer, so they told him the truth. "Because we know we got it wrong before, and because your story deserves to be told, not for views, but because it matters." Something in their tone must have resonated, because he eventually agreed. Over the next few weeks, they followed his journey as he worked with counselors, attended job training programs, and slowly pieced his life back together. Every frame of footage was handled with care, ensuring his dignity remained intact. Another woman they featured ran a small grassroots initiative feeding hundreds of homeless individuals each week. She had no funding, relying entirely on donations and volunteers. Her energy was infectious and her passion inspired everyone around her. By highlighting her work, they hoped to bring attention not just to the issue of homelessness, but to the everyday heroes fighting to solve it. Editing the footage proved challenging too. Without the flashy music or dramatic captions they used to rely on, they worried the videos might feel flat. Yet, as they watched the rough cuts, they realized something powerful. The stories spoke for themselves. There was no need for gimmicks or tricks. The authenticity shone through, drawing viewers in not with shock but with heart. When the first episode of the new series launched, they held their breath. Would anyone watch? Would people forgive them for their past mistakes? To their surprise, The response was overwhelmingly positive. Viewers praised the shift in tone, calling it refreshing and inspiring. Comment sections, once filled with anger and accusations, now overflowed with gratitude and encouragement. "Thank you for showing us the human side of homelessness," one person wrote. "This is what awareness should look like." Of course, not everyone forgave them. Some critics argued that their past actions couldn't simply be erased, no matter how sincere their current efforts seemed, and they understood that. Forgiveness wasn't something they expected or deserved, but they hoped their continued commitment to doing better might eventually earn back a measure of trust. The biggest change, however, happened within themselves. As they immersed themselves in this new project, they began to see the world differently. Homelessness wasn't just a statistic or a topic for debate. It was a deeply personal struggle faced by real people with dreams, fears, and hopes. Their perspective shifted from seeing individuals as subjects for content to recognizing them as partners in storytelling. Working alongside nonprofits and advocates also gave them a crash course in systemic issues. They learned about policies that perpetuated cycles of poverty, barriers to affordable housing, and gaps in mental health services. Armed with this knowledge, they started using their platform to educate others, sharing resources and encouraging viewers to take action in meaningful ways, whether by volunteering, donating, or advocating for policy changes. By the time the fourth episode aired, their audience had shrunk significantly. Gone were the millions of views and viral sensations. But those who stayed engaged with their content did so because they believed in its purpose. Brands that aligned with their mission began reaching out again, offering sponsorships not for sensationalism, but for genuine partnerships aimed at creating impact. Looking back, they realized how far they had come, not just professionally, but personally. Fame no longer held the same allure. Success was no longer measured in likes or shares, but in the smiles of the people they helped and the progress they witnessed. Their journey hadn't been easy, and it certainly wasn't over. But for the first time, they felt proud of the work they were doing. Though scars from their past mistakes would always remain, they chose to wear them as reminders of lessons learned. Exploitation had brought them fleeting fame, but empathy and authenticity offered something far more rewarding: the chance to truly make a difference. And as they prepared for the next phase of their lives, they knew one thing for certain: they would never forget the faces, the stories, and the humanity that had taught them what it meant to create with purpose. As the documentary series gained traction, the creators found themselves stepping into roles they had never imagined. They were no longer just filmmakers chasing fame. They were storytellers, advocates, and allies in a much larger movement. The transition wasn't seamless, but it was deeply rewarding. Every episode brought them closer to understanding the complexities of homelessness, and every interaction with the people they featured reminded them of why this work mattered. One of the most transformative moments came during the filming of their fifth episode. This particular story focused on a young mother who had been living out of her car with her two children. She had lost her job when the pandemic hit, and despite working tirelessly to get back on her feet, she couldn't escape the cycle of poverty. Her resilience was inspiring, but what struck the creators most was her determination to shield her kids from the harsh realities of their situation. They spent days talking to her, not just about her struggles, but also about her dreams for the future. She spoke passionately about wanting to provide stability for her family and give her children opportunities she never had. When they asked if they could film her daily routine, she agreed, but only after laying down some ground rules. "I don't want pity," she told them firmly, "and I don't want my kids reduced to props. If you're going to tell my story, make sure it's about hope, not despair." Her words stuck with them long after the cameras stopped rolling. For the first time, they fully understood that storytelling wasn't just about capturing moments. It was about honoring the humanity of the people involved. They approached every frame of footage with care, ensuring her dignity remained at the forefront. The final edit highlighted not just her hardships, but also her strength, resourcefulness, and unwavering love for her children. When the episode aired, viewers responded with overwhelming support, praising the authenticity and respectfulness of the portrayal. But the journey wasn't without its challenges. Some days the weight of their past mistakes felt like a shadow they couldn't shake. Even as they worked tirelessly to do better, there were moments when doubt crept in. Was it possible to truly make amends for the harm they had caused? Could they ever earn back the trust of those they had exploited? These questions haunted them, especially during quiet moments late at night. One evening, as they sat reviewing footage from an upcoming episode, one of them broke the silence. "Do you think we'll ever be forgiven?" The question hung heavy in the air, unanswered for several minutes. Finally, the other replied softly, "Maybe forgiveness isn't ours to demand. All we can do is keep showing up, keep doing the work, and let our actions speak for themselves." It was a humbling realization, but it gave them clarity. Forgiveness wasn't the goal. It was a byproduct of consistent effort. What mattered most was staying committed to the path they had chosen, even when it felt difficult or thankless. And so, they continued pouring their energy into the project, determined to create content that uplifted rather than exploited. Their collaboration with nonprofit organizations deepened over time, leading to unexpected opportunities. One shelter coordinator invited them to participate in a community event aimed at raising awareness about affordable housing initiatives. At first, they hesitated, unsure if their presence would be welcomed. But the coordinator reassured them, saying, "Your platform has power. Use it wisely and you'll see how much good you can do." The event turned out to be a turning point. Hundreds of people attended, including local leaders, activists, and members of the homeless community. As they stood behind a booth sharing information about their documentary series, they were approached by a man who introduced himself as someone who had once lived on the streets. He thanked them for changing their approach and expressed gratitude for the way their new content portrayed individuals with respect and empathy. It was a small moment, but it meant the world to them. Inspired by the connections they made at the event, they decided to expand their efforts beyond filmmaking. They began organizing fundraising campaigns to support shelters and grassroots initiatives. They used their social media channels not just to promote their videos but also to share resources, volunteer opportunities, and educational materials about homelessness. Their followers, though fewer in number than before, became more engaged and motivated to take action. One campaign they launched raised enough money to help renovate a dilapidated shelter, providing safe and comfortable spaces for dozens of individuals. Another initiative focused on collecting winter clothing and supplies for people living outdoors. Seeing the tangible impact of their work filled them with a sense of purpose they had never experienced during their pursuit of fame. Yet, amid all the progress, they remained acutely aware of their limitations. No matter how hard they worked, they couldn't solve systemic issues overnight. Homelessness was a complex problem rooted in decades of policy failures, economic inequality, and societal neglect. Their role wasn't to fix everything. It was to contribute in whatever way they could while amplifying the voices of those leading the charge. Their perspective shifted further as they continued learning from the people they worked with. A veteran who had struggled with addiction shared his journey of recovery and how finding stable housing had transformed his life. A teenager who had aged out of foster care talked about the challenges of navigating adulthood without a support system. Each story added depth and nuance to their understanding, reminding them that homelessness wasn't a monolith. It was a tapestry of individual experiences shaped by unique circumstances. By the time they wrapped up the 8th episode of the series, they noticed a subtle change in themselves. They no longer saw success through the lens of metrics or milestones. Instead, they measured it by the relationships they built, the lives they touched, and the knowledge they gained. Fame, which had once consumed their thoughts, now seemed trivial, compared to the fulfillment they found in meaningful work. Still, they knew their journey was far from over. There would always be more stories to tell, more injustices to address, and more ways to grow. But for the first time, they felt confident in the direction they were heading. They weren't perfect, and they didn't pretend to have all the answers. What they did have was a renewed sense of purpose and a commitment to using their skills for good. As they prepared to start filming their 9th episode, They reflected on how much they had changed since the early days of chasing viral videos. Back then, they had viewed people as characters in a narrative designed to shock and entertain. Now they saw them as collaborators in a shared mission to inspire change. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but they were ready to face whatever came next, with humility, empathy, and hope. The creators had come a long way from the days when their only goal was to chase internet fame. Their journey, from exploiting vulnerable people for views to becoming advocates for meaningful change, was far from perfect, but it was real. Each step they took taught them something new about themselves and the world around them. By the time they reached the final episodes of their documentary series, they weren't just telling stories anymore. They were part of those stories. One of the most powerful moments came during the filming of their 10th episode. This particular story focused on a man who had spent over a decade living on the streets after losing his home in a fire. He had battled addiction and depression, but with the help of a local recovery program, he managed to turn his life around. Today, he worked as a counselor at the same shelter that had once taken him in. His transformation was nothing short of remarkable, yet what struck the creators most was his humility. "I'm not special," he told them one afternoon while sitting outside the shelter. "I'm proof that anyone can change if they're given a chance." Those words stayed with them long after the cameras stopped rolling. They realized how much strength it must have taken for him to rebuild his life, and how many others might be capable of doing the same if they had access to similar support systems. As they edited the footage, they made sure to highlight not just his personal journey but also the programs and resources that had helped him along the way. The episode ended with a call to action, encouraging viewers to donate to organizations working to provide affordable housing, mental health services, and job training programs. To their surprise, the response was overwhelming. People didn't just watch. They acted. Donations poured in, volunteers signed up, and local businesses offered to partner with shelters. For the first time, the creators felt like they were truly making an impact, not through flashy content, but through genuine connection and collaboration. But even as their work gained momentum, they couldn't ignore the lingering doubts that occasionally surfaced. Had they done enough to make amends for their past mistakes? Could they ever fully repair the damage they had caused? These questions weighed heavily on them, especially during quiet moments when the noise of the day faded away. One night, as they sat reviewing notes for an upcoming project, one of them voiced what they had both been thinking. "Do you think we'll ever feel like we've done enough?" The other hesitated before responding. "Probably not," they admitted. "But maybe that's okay. Maybe the point isn't to reach some finish line, it's to keep moving forward, no matter how hard it gets." That conversation became a turning point. Instead of focusing on whether they would ever fix everything, they shifted their mindset to embracing the process. Change wasn't something that happened overnight. It was built brick by brick, moment by moment. And every effort, no matter how small, mattered. Their commitment to this philosophy led to unexpected opportunities. Local schools invited them to speak to students about empathy and social responsibility. Community centers asked them to host workshops on storytelling and activism. Even policymakers began reaching out, eager to learn more about the issues highlighted in their documentaries. With each new opportunity, they grew more confident in their ability to use their platform for good. One of the most rewarding experiences came when they collaborated with a group of formerly homeless individuals to create a photography exhibit. The idea was simple: give cameras to people who had experienced homelessness and let them capture their own perspectives. The resulting images were breathtaking, raw, honest, and deeply personal. Some photos showed abandoned buildings and empty alleyways, while others depicted moments of joy and resilience. Together, they painted a picture of life on the margins that was far more nuanced than anything the creators could have captured alone. When the exhibit opened to the public, hundreds of people attended. Many were moved to tears by the power of the images and the stories behind them. One attendee approached the creators afterward, holding back tears. "This is the first time I've seen homelessness portrayed in a way that feels human," she said. "Thank you for letting these voices be heard." Hearing those words reminded them why they had started down this path in the first place. It wasn't about fame or recognition. It was about giving a platform to those who had been silenced for too long. And though they still carried the weight of their past mistakes, they knew they were heading in the right direction. As the months went by, their audience continued to shrink, but they didn't mind. The people who stayed engaged with their content did so because they believed in its purpose. Brands that aligned with their mission began partnering with them again, offering sponsorships not for sensationalism, but for authentic collaborations, aimed at creating real-world impact. Though their numbers weren't as high as they used to be, the connections they forged felt deeper and more meaningful. Looking back, they realized how much they had grown, not just professionally, but personally. Fame no longer held the same allure. Success wasn't measured in likes, shares, or viral videos. It was measured in the smiles of the people they helped and the progress they witnessed. Their journey hadn't been easy, and it certainly wasn't over. But for the first time, they felt proud of the work they were doing. They also came to understand that their role wasn't to be heroes or saviors. Real change came from within communities, driven by the people who lived and breathed the issues every day. All they could do was amplify those efforts, using their skills to shine a light where it was needed most. It was a humbling realization, but it gave them clarity. In the end, their story wasn't just about redemption, it was about growth. They had started out chasing fame, blind to the harm they were causing. But through failure, accountability, and hard work, they found a new purpose. They learned that true impact came not from exploiting pain, but from amplifying hope. And though scars from their past mistakes would always remain, they chose to wear them as reminders of lessons learned. As they prepared to launch their next project, a podcast series featuring conversations with activists, policymakers, and community leaders, they reflected on how far they had come. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but they were ready to face whatever came next with humility, empathy, and determination. Because now, more than ever, they understood that the most important stories weren't about them. They were about the people whose lives inspired them to keep going, one step at a time.